He told the court I was just a housewife. And when his lawyer said it out loud, like it was a fact stamped on paper, my ex-husband actually smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone you once loved. The kind you give when you think you've already won. We were in courtroom 4B on a rainy Tuesday in late October, the sort of gray day that makes everything feel colder than it is. The benches were full of strangers waiting for their own lives to be rearranged by a judge. The ceiling lights buzzed softly. My hands were folded in my lap, nails trimmed short because I'd been biting them for weeks. And across the aisle, there he was, Grant Whitmore, suit pressed, hair perfect, tie straight. He looked like the kind of man who always had an answer. He looked safe. That was the most brutal part, because the only person in that room who knew what he was capable of was me. His attorney stood, cleared his throat, and nodded toward me like I was an item on a list. "Your Honor," he said, "Mrs. Whitmore has been just a housewife for the last 12 years. She has no meaningful income. She's asking for a ridiculous share of marital assets she did not create. Just a housewife." The words didn't hit me like an insult. They hit me like a trap door. Because it wasn't just a label. It was a strategy. A way to shrink me right there on the record. So everything that belonged to me could be handed to him. My attorney, a calm woman named Diane Keller, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, didn't flinch. She just scribbled something on her legal pad, then leaned toward me. "Keep your face neutral," she whispered. "He wants you to react." I swallowed. I stared at the judge, and I reminded myself of the truth. The truth Grant had spent years carefully hiding. Yes, I was a housewife. I also ran his entire life. I built the system that kept his money clean. And if he was about to call me nothing, then I was about to show the court exactly what nothing could do. Because the last 12 years weren't a story of me staying home. They were a story of me disappearing, piece by piece, so he could grow bigger. And I didn't disappear quietly. I disappeared strategically. I met Grant when I was 26. Back then, my name was Claire Bennett. I had a bachelor's degree in communications, a sharp laugh, and a habit of planning my life like a spreadsheet. I wasn't rich, but I was steady. I worked in an event management office in downtown Seattle, the kind of place where you wear black and solve other people's problems for a living. Grant walked into one of my meetings late, carrying a leather briefcase and a smile that made the room tilt toward him. He was launching a new financial consulting firm. He needed a corporate gala. He said my name like he'd already practiced it. "Claire," he said, "I need someone who can make chaos look elegant." I laughed, because that was basically my job description. He tipped well, thanked me like I mattered, and texted me later with a photo of the event and a simple message. "You saved my night. Dinner?" He didn't chase me like a movie. He built a case, flowers on Tuesdays, a voice message when I sounded tired, a conversation about my goals. He asked questions. He remembered answers. He made me feel like my mind was something he admired, not something he wanted to control. And when he proposed, it was after a year and a half, on a hiking trail overlooking the water, the sky so blue it looked like forgiveness. "I want a life with you," he said. "A real one. A team." A team. That word mattered, because I believed him. We married in a small church with a backyard reception. My parents cried. His mother, Lorraine, smiled like she was approving a purchase. Grant kissed my forehead and whispered, "You'll never have to worry again." I thought he meant safety. What he meant was dependence. The first year was sweet. The second year was busy. By the third year, his firm had exploded. Clients, contracts, new employees. He was always on the phone, always just one more call. And I started doing what partners do. I picked up the slack. I scheduled his meetings. I handled the travel. I made sure his suits were cleaned. His meals were ready. His mother got birthday gifts. And his paperwork didn't fall apart. At first, he thanked me. Then he expected me. Then he acted like it was my role. In the same way the stove's role is to heat the food. Automatic, invisible. The day I found out I was pregnant with our first child, I was sitting on the bathroom floor with the test in my hand, laughing and shaking at the same time. Grant came home late. I met him in the hallway, the test behind my back like a surprise. "We're going to be parents," I said. His face went still, then softened into something that looked like joy. He hugged me tight. He whispered, "This is perfect." Then he pulled back and said, "Okay, we have to be smart." That was the beginning. "We have to be smart" meant we'll cut your hours so you're not stressed. We'll be practical. My income is enough. You'll be better at home, Claire. You're organized. You can handle it. You'll be so good at it. I told myself it was temporary, just until the baby was older, just until we stabilized, but just until is how people lose years. Our daughter, Emily, arrived in spring, and the day I held her, warm and blinking and perfect, I felt a love so huge it scared me. Grant held her too. He cried. He kissed her tiny hand. And I thought, we are building something real. Then the bills started coming. Not because we couldn't afford them, because Grant wanted me to see what he wanted me to see. He became the gatekeeper. He insisted we simplify finances. "It's easier if everything runs through one account," he said, "so you don't have to deal with stress." I didn't realize I was being trained, like a person taught not to touch the stove, like a person taught that questions are dangerous. When I asked about a new credit card that arrived in his name, he smiled like I was cute. "It's for business," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." When I asked why our mortgage was refinanced, he kissed my cheek. "Better interest rate," he said. "Don't clutter your mind with numbers." Numbers, the thing I used to love, the thing he'd decided I didn't deserve. Then came our second child, Noah. Then came the move. A bigger house in a gated neighborhood outside Bellevue. Tall windows, white trim, a kitchen that looked like a magazine spread. Grant walked me through it like a real estate agent. "Look," he said, "this is what I can do for us." I should have noticed that he said I can, not we can. But I was tired. I was nursing. I was packing lunch boxes and wiping fingerprints off glass. And when a life feels heavy, you stop checking if the weight is fair. The first time I heard him call me just a housewife was at a dinner party. One of his clients asked what I did. Before I could answer, Grant lifted his wine glass and said, smiling, "Oh, Claire is a full-time housewife. She's the CEO of Snacks and Homework." Everyone laughed politely. I laughed too, because laughing was easier than standing up and rewriting the story in front of strangers. But something inside me tightened. Not because being a housewife was shameful, but because I knew the truth. I wasn't just anything. I ran the calendar. I ran the kids' schedules. I ran the house. I managed the vendors, the repairs, the school paperwork, the budgeting that Grant claimed to handle but always forgot to do. And when his firm started having cash flow issues, he didn't tell me. He just started asking me to sign things. "Just initial here," he'd say. "Just sign this. It's for taxes." Just help me, Claire. I'm under pressure. He said just the way people say please when they mean obey. And because I trusted him, because I believed in team, I signed. Years passed. Emily grew into a serious child with observant eyes. Noah became wild and loud and loving. Grant became sharper, less patient, more irritated by small sounds. He started coming home later. He started guarding his phone like it was a heartbeat. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd sigh like I was exhausting. You don't understand what it takes, he'd say. I'm carrying everything. Carrying everything. While I carried 2 children, a house, and the emotional weather of a man who never admitted he was wrong. Then one Friday in early summer, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter. Not addressed to me, addressed to him. From the county clerk's office. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning. I picked it up, feeling that odd little spark of instinct, like when you hear a dog bark in the wrong tone. I opened it. Inside was a notice, a recorded lien, against our home, my home. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like my body forgot how to hold itself. I read it twice, then 3 times, because the words didn't fit my life. Lien, secured interest, outstanding balance. I stood there in the bright kitchen, sunlight spilling across the marble, and I felt like I was standing in a movie set, pretty, fake, and ready to collapse. Grant came in an hour later, whistling softly, keys in hand. I held the notice up like it was a weapon. What is this? I asked. His face changed in a blink. Not guilt, not fear, annoyance. Like I'd broken a rule by asking. That wasn't for you, he said. It came to our house, I said. It's on our home. He set his keys down slowly, then smiled the way he smiled at clients. Controlled, professional. Claire, he said, I handled it. You're overreacting. Overreacting. The word men use when they don't want to answer. What did you do? I asked. He exhaled loud. I used the equity, he said. It's an investment. We'll pay it off. It's fine. You used the equity without telling me? He shrugged. I'm the one who understands this stuff. I stared at him, at the man who once told me he admired my mind, now acting like I didn't have one. Am I on the loan? I asked. He hesitated just a fraction. Then he said, No, it's in the business. A lie so smooth it sounded like truth, and I almost accepted it. Until I noticed something else. The document number, the date. It had been recorded 8 months ago. 8 months. He'd been living beside me for 8 months, laughing with our kids, eating the dinners I cooked, sleeping in my bed, while our home was quietly being used as collateral. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared of debt, because I was scared of what else I didn't know. When you realize a person can hide one thing, you start wondering how many rooms in your life are locked. The next morning, while Grant was at a meeting, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a laptop. I logged into the county records portal, and I searched our address. I expected 1 lien, maybe 2. What I found made my hands go cold. There were multiple filings, a second lien, a UCC filing tied to his company, a deed of trust I didn't recognize, and then a document that made my vision blur, quitclaim deed, recorded 6 months ago, from me to him. My name was there. My signature was there. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. It was mine. In the way a mask is a face, I stared at it, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. He forged me. He forged my name. He moved ownership, quietly, cleanly, on paper, and he did it while telling people I was just a housewife. I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I didn't confront him. Because in that moment, something in me clicked into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And if I reacted like a wounded spouse, I would lose. So I reacted like a woman who had finally found the blueprint. I called Diane Keller. I didn't know she'd become my attorney later. At that moment, she was just a name my friend had whispered months ago. Family lawyer, my friend had said. Smart, quiet, ruthless when necessary. When Diane answered, I said, I think my husband forged my signature on our deed. There was a pause. Then her voice went low. Do not tell him you know, she said. Bring me everything. Everything. That word felt like a lifeline. That weekend, I became someone new. Not outwardly. Outwardly, I was still the mother making pancakes. Still the woman packing backpacks. Still the wife smiling at Grant across the dinner table. But inside, I was gathering evidence like oxygen. I downloaded documents. I printed records. I pulled emails. I searched through our home office when he showered, careful to leave everything exactly where it was. I found folders labeled with names I didn't recognize. Shell companies, LLCs, bank statements, and a handwritten list of accounts with balances that made my stomach twist. There was money everywhere, just not where I could reach it. Grant wasn't struggling. He was hiding, and he was moving pieces. Then, 2 weeks later, he dropped the next bomb like it was an announcement about weather. I filed for divorce, he said, pouring coffee. I froze with a plate in my hand. You... what? I filed, he repeated, calm. It's best. We've grown apart. He said it like it was mutual, like I hadn't been blindsided, like I hadn't just discovered his forged deed. My mind raced. I wanted to shout, to throw the coffee, to demand answers. Instead, I set the plate down slowly and said, okay. His eyes narrowed slightly. He had expected panic. He had expected begging. He had expected me to prove his story, that I was helpless. I watched him adjust his cufflinks, and that's when he said it, the line that turned my blood to ice. You'll have to move out, he added. It's in my name. In my name. Because he stole it. That night, in our bedroom. He slept like a man without conscience. I lay awake and listened to his breathing. I thought about Emily, Noah, the house, the lie. And I decided something simple. If Grant wanted to build a case that I was nothing, then I would let him. I would let him underestimate me. Because underestimation is the most expensive mistake a person can make. The first court hearing came fast. Temporary orders, custody schedule, temporary support. Grant showed up with a lawyer who looked like he charged extra for confidence. I sat next to Diane, wearing a navy dress that made me feel like myself again. Grant wouldn't look at me. He didn't need to. He believed he'd already written the ending. When his attorney called me just a housewife, Grant smiled, and the judge nodded slowly, like it made sense. It was the moment Grant wanted, the moment he wanted on paper. And Diane still didn't react. She waited. Because the truth doesn't work like a punch. It works like a slow reveal. After the hearing, outside the courthouse, Grant finally spoke to me. He stepped close enough that no one else could hear. You should take the settlement, he murmured. It's generous for someone like you. Someone like you. I held his gaze. What does that mean? I asked softly. He smiled again. You didn't build what I built, he said. You stayed home. You helped. But you don't get half of my life. My life, not ours. Then he leaned closer. And if you fight, I'll drag it out until you're broke." He walked away with the confidence of a man who thinks money is the only weapon. He didn't know I'd already found his other weapon: paper, records, signatures. And a forged deed is not a marital dispute. It's a crime. The next month was a performance. On the outside, I played the part he wanted: the overwhelmed mother, the woman asking for too much, the housewife who didn't understand business. I let his attorney talk over me in mediation. I let Grant sigh dramatically when I asked for full disclosure. I let them think I was emotional, because emotion makes people sloppy. And Grant was getting sloppy. He started emailing his accountant late at night. He started transferring money between accounts. He started doing what men do when they believe no one is watching. He started leaving tracks. Diane filed discovery requests. Grant responded with partials and excuses. He claimed accounts didn't exist. He claimed companies weren't his. He claimed he didn't have access. And every lie he told, Diane documented. Then came the day Diane looked up from her laptop in her office and said, "Claire, this is bigger than divorce." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" She turned the screen toward me. On it was a chart, a web of accounts, LLCs, transfers, loans, and one glaring line highlighted in yellow, a notary stamp on the quitclaim deed. The notary's name was listed, the date, the location. Diane said, "The notary claims she notarized your signature in person." I stared. "I wasn't there," I said. "I never met her." Diane nodded. "I believe you," she said, "but we need to prove it." "How?" I whispered. Diane leaned back, calm. "We subpoena the notary," she said. "We subpoena the logs. We subpoena her camera footage if she has it. And we compare your real signature to the forged one." My heart pounded. "What happens if we prove it?" Diane's eyes hardened. "Then it's fraud," she said, "and your husband's entire strategy collapses." The next court date was set for the following month. Grant thought it would be another routine hearing. He thought the judge would keep seeing me as the little woman asking for money she didn't earn. So he walked in confident. He wore a gray suit this time. He laughed with his attorney. He nodded politely at the bailiff. He didn't look at me. And I sat quietly, because I wasn't there to be loud. I was there to be undeniable. The judge called the case. The attorney stood. Grant's lawyer started as expected. He spoke about Grant's business, Grant's income, Grant's burden. Then he gestured toward me again. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "has been unemployed by choice. She has no business knowledge, no work history relevant to these financial entities, and frankly, no reason to be involved in complex asset division beyond a reasonable support arrangement. Just a housewife." Again. Grant smiled again. And for a second I let myself feel it. That old familiar sting. The sting of being dismissed. Then Diane stood. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to address the court's assumption that my client has no meaningful involvement in the marital finances." The judge looked slightly irritated, like he wanted to move on. Diane continued anyway. "In the course of discovery, we located a quitclaim deed transferring Mrs. Whitmore's interest in the marital home to Mr. Whitmore," she said. Grant's smile stayed on his face, because he thought the deed was his shield. Diane held up a copy. "This deed was recorded on April 12th, she said. "It bears a notarized signature purported to be my client's." The judge leaned forward slightly. Diane's voice stayed calm. "My client denies signing this deed," she said. "And we have evidence it could not have been signed by her, because on the date and time listed on the notary log, Mrs. Whitmore was documented as being at Evergreen Pediatric Clinic with her son, Noah Whitmore, for a scheduled appointment. Grant's smile twitched. Not gone. Just not as stable, Diane continued. We have the clinic's time-stamped records. We have the security footage. We have the check-in signature, which matches my client's known handwriting. Then Diane placed another folder on the table. And we also have the notary's log, which contains irregularities. The log indicates Mrs. Whitmore presented identification that does not match her driver's license number. Grant's jaw tightened. The judge's expression changed. Not anger, interest. The judge looked at Grant. "Mr. Whitmore," he said slowly, "do you have an explanation for this discrepancy?" Grant's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, this is an accusation without..." "Counsel," the judge interrupted, firm. "I asked Mr. Whitmore." Grant cleared his throat. For the first time since all this started, he looked uncertain. I'm not sure," he said. "I assumed..." "You assumed your wife signed away her interest," the judge said. "And you didn't verify?" Grant's attorney whispered to him. Grant's face flushed slightly. He said, "Your Honor, my wife is emotional. She's trying to create drama." Drama? There it was. The old move, the dismissal, the attempt to paint me as unstable. Diane didn't react. She simply said, "Your Honor, we have also requested the original deed packet. The signature on the deed differs from my client's signature in multiple documented samples. We have retained a forensic document examiner. We're prepared to proceed." The courtroom got quiet. Even the buzzing lights seemed louder. Grant's lawyer shifted, suddenly less confident. The judge leaned back, staring at Grant, as if seeing him for the first time. Then the judge said something that felt like air returning to my lungs. "This is serious," he said. "If the allegation is true, it is not simply a divorce matter." Grant swallowed. His smile was gone now. The judge continued. "I am ordering an immediate temporary restraining order preventing transfer or encumbrance of marital assets, including the marital home," he said. "Mr. Whitmore will provide full financial disclosure within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in sanctions." Grant's attorney started to protest again. The judge held up a hand. "And," he added, "I am referring the alleged forged deed to the appropriate authorities for review." Grant's face went pale, just slightly, but enough, because Grant had built his entire world on the idea that he could move paper silently. Now, the paper was speaking. Outside the courthouse, Grant cornered Diane near the elevators. His voice was low and urgent. "This is insane," he hissed. "She's lying." Diane looked at him, expression blank. "If she's lying," Diane said, "then you have nothing to worry about." Grant's eyes flicked to me, and in that look, I saw it. Not love, not regret, fear, because he finally understood. I wasn't the housewife in his story anymore. I was the witness in mine. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Grant's attorney demanded extensions. Grant suddenly couldn't locate documents. Accounts didn't exist. Companies weren't active. But when the court orders come down, excuses sound like confessions. Diane filed motions, subpoenas went out, banks responded, and the truth began to appear in clean, merciless lines. Grant had more money than he claimed. Grant had moved funds to his mother's account. Grant had paid his new girlfriend's rent under a business expense category labeled consulting. Yes, new girlfriend, because of course. When you see one lie, you start seeing the whole network. Emily noticed something before I told her anything. Kids always do. One night, as I tucked her in, she said, "Daddy's mad at you." I paused. "How do you know?" I asked. She shrugged, eyes serious. "He talks on the phone and says your name like it tastes bad." My throat tightened. I kissed her forehead. "Daddy and I are figuring things out," I said softly. Emily studied me. "Are we going to lose the house?" she asked. That question was the reason I didn't collapse. I sat on the edge of her bed and said, "No," very calmly. "We're not." She nodded, trusting me like I was gravity. And I promised myself I would not let my children learn that power always wins. Because power is loud, but truth is patient. The next hearing came with a forensic report. The examiner concluded the deed signature was highly inconsistent with my natural handwriting. Translation: not mine. The notary, when subpoenaed, turned out to be a small business employee who claimed she notarized so many documents she couldn't remember. But her log was precise. And it showed something that made the judge's eyebrow lift. The same driver's license number used for me on the deed had been used 2 weeks earlier for a completely different woman on a different document. A duplicated identity. A pattern. Grant's lawyer tried to argue administrative error, but administrative errors don't create forged deeds. And then Diane revealed the piece that made the courtroom tilt. A bank transfer. 2 days after the forged deed was recorded, Grant had applied for an equity line of credit using the updated ownership status. He had used my stolen share of the house to borrow more money. And where did that money go? Into an account under Lorraine Whitmore's name, his mother. Grant wasn't just trying to win the house. He was trying to strip it, like a car being dismantled for parts. The judge looked at Grant like he was something unpleasant discovered under a rug. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge said, voice flat, "do you understand the magnitude of what is being presented?" Grant's hands gripped the table. He didn't answer. His attorney spoke for him, quieter now. "Your Honor, we are willing to negotiate." Negotiate, the word that appears when arrogance dies. Diane didn't smile. She simply said, "Your Honor, we request immediate exclusive use and occupancy for my client and children, restoration of her property, interest pending resolution, and attorney's fees due to bad faith litigation." The judge didn't hesitate. Orders were issued, exclusive occupancy, to me. Grant was ordered to move out within 72 hours. Full access to financial accounts, to be disclosed. Attorney's fees awarded, and the case shifted. Because once fraud enters the room, everything changes. When Grant showed up at the house to pack, he didn't bring a moving crew. He brought one suitcase. He moved quietly, eyes down. Lorraine waited in the driveway, furious, whispering to him like a coach trying to save a losing team. When Grant saw me standing at the doorway, he stopped. For a moment, I expected him to yell, to blame me, to threaten. Instead, he said something that proved he still didn't understand. "You're ruining my life," he whispered. I stared at him. "You ruined your life when you forged my signature," I said, calm. His face twisted. "I did it for us," he said, desperate. "To protect what I built. What you built. Always. Never what we built." He looked toward the living room, where Emily's drawings were taped to the wall. For a second, his eyes softened. Then he hardened again. He said, "You're still just a housewife." He tried to say it like armor, like if he repeated it, it would become true again. I took a step closer, not aggressive, not dramatic, just present, and I said, "Then you should have been terrified of what a housewife could learn." He swallowed. He walked past me, and for the first time in years, I heard the front door close behind him without feeling like I was the one being locked out. The months that followed were brutal in quiet ways. Depositions, paperwork, parenting schedules, nights where I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of documents and felt like I was learning to breathe in a new body. But with each document, with each account uncovered, with each lie placed under light, I felt something returning. Not confidence, not peace, agency. Grant's business, under scrutiny, revealed more than he expected. He had commingled funds. He had misclassified expenses. He had used client money to cover personal debts. Not enough to send him to prison immediately, but enough to make his reputation tremble. And for a man like Grant, reputation is oxygen. His clients started quietly leaving. His friends stopped calling. Lorraine stopped smiling in public. The divorce settlement negotiations changed overnight. The same attorney who once smirked now used careful, polite language. Grant offered a deal, a generous one. He offered to restore my interest in the home. He offered substantial support. He offered a larger share of assets, and he asked through his attorney for one thing: no criminal referral, no further pursuit, a quiet end. Diane looked at me across her desk. "It's your choice," she said, "but understand what he's buying. He's buying silence." Silence. The thing women are expected to sell. I thought about Emily asking if we would lose the house. I thought about Noah's laugh in the backyard. I thought about the way Grant used just a housewife, like a chain. And I realized something. If I accepted silence, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was teaching my children that someone can steal from you if they do it in a suit. So I made a counteroffer. I would settle, but only if the agreement included full admission of the deed being invalid, court-ordered restoration, attorney's fees, and a formal written stipulation of misconduct, not for gossip, for record, for truth. Grant's attorney tried to push back, but Diane didn't, and neither did I, because I wasn't begging anymore. I was negotiating from reality. The final hearing came on a bright morning in early spring. The courthouse steps were dry. The trees outside were beginning to bud. In the courtroom, the settlement was read into the record. Grant stood at the table, face tight. The judge confirmed the terms. Then the judge looked at Grant and said, "Mr. Whitmore, do you acknowledge these facts as part of the settlement?" Grant's jaw worked. He glanced toward his attorney. Then he said, barely audible, "Yes." One word, but it sounded like a door closing. When we walked out, the rain was gone. The air felt lighter. Diane walked beside me, carrying her briefcase. "You did well," she said simply. I nodded, throat tight. Outside, I paused at the top of the courthouse steps. For a second, I looked back. Grant was still inside, talking to Lorraine. Lorraine's hands were moving wildly, furious. Grant's shoulders were slumped. The man who once told the world I was nothing now looked like someone who'd been forced to see the cost of underestimating. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply turned and walked down the steps, because the win wasn't humiliating him. The win was remembering who I was, under the label he gave me. Weeks later, I stood in the kitchen of my home, my name restored on the deed, the papers filed properly, the locks changed, the heir finally mine. Emily sat at the table doing homework, Noah built a tower out of cereal boxes and laughed every time it fell. I watched them, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. Not because a man promised it, because I built it. That night, after they were asleep, I opened a drawer and pulled out the old document copies Diane told me to keep. The forged deed, the notary log, the forensic report, evidence, a story in paper. I stared at the line where my name had been copied, where my identity had been stolen, and I realized something. People think housewife means small. They think it means dependent. They think it means powerless. But a housewife, a woman who runs the invisible systems, a woman who keeps life moving, a woman who holds a family together with routine and patience, is not weak. She's trained, she's observant, she's resilient, and if you push her into a corner, she doesn't always scream. Sometimes she studies the blueprint. Sometimes she waits. Sometimes she takes the very words meant to shrink her and uses them as cover, while she rebuilds. Grant wanted the court to believe I was just a housewife. He wanted the judge to see me as background noise. But what he didn't understand is that background noise is often the only thing that hears everything. And once you hear everything, you can't be fooled again. You can only decide what you'll do with the truth. Lesson. Never let someone define your worth with a label that benefits them. Just is a word people use when they want your life to fit inside their story. But your work, your sacrifice, your intelligence, and your instincts don't disappear because someone refuses to recognize them. If you've been underestimated, don't waste your energy proving your value to someone committed to ignoring it. Protect yourself. Document everything. Get the right help. And remember this: the moment you stop begging to be seen is the moment you become impossible to erase. And that was the part no one warns you about. Not the court dates, not the paperwork, not even the heartbreak. The part that comes after, when the house is quiet again, and you realize the person who tried to erase you is still out there, still breathing, still convinced you got lucky. Grant didn't think I beat him. Grant thought the judge misunderstood him. He thought Diane outlawyered his lawyer. He thought the system leaned too sympathetic toward me. He did not think. I outsmarted him, and when a man like Grant can't accept that, he looks for a way to rewrite the ending. That's what started happening 3 months after the settlement. It began with something small, a letter, thin paper, official-looking font, the kind that makes your skin react before your brain does. It arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, mixed in with a grocery coupon booklet and a school fundraiser flyer Emily had already circled in purple marker. I opened it at the kitchen counter while Noah argued with himself about whether cereal counted as dinner. The return address made my stomach tighten. Whitmore Financial Consulting, Grant's company. Even after everything, seeing that logo felt like hearing his voice in an empty room. Inside was a short note, polite on the surface, poisonous underneath. It said the settlement required the home to be refinanced within 90 days, or the property could be subject to further legal action due to outstanding obligations tied to the business. I reread it. Then I read it again slower. My hands stayed steady, but my chest went cold. Because this was exactly what he did. He wrapped threats in paperwork. He dressed intimidation in professional language. And the worst part was, it almost sounded plausible. I had the deed back. the occupancy order, the settlement. But Grant had created so many filings, so many lines of debt, so many overlapping financial entities. It would be easy for him to pretend something was still attached to me. My first instinct was to panic, to picture sheriff's notices, courtrooms again, Emily asking that same question. Are we going to lose the house? But the second instinct, stronger, sharper, was something new. I picked up my phone and called Diane. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been expecting me to call since the day we signed the settlement. Tell me exactly what the letter says, she said. I read it word for word. There was a pause, then a quiet, humorless exhale. He's fishing, Diane said. Fishing for what? I asked. For fear, she replied. For a mistake. For you to contact him directly. For you to refinance under pressure so he can attach new debt. My throat tightened. So it's not real? It's real that he's trying, Diane said. But it's not real that he can do that under the settlement. Not unless there's something new. Something new. That phrase made my skin crawl. Diane continued, do not respond to him. Forward it to me. I'll respond through counsel. And Claire, check your credit. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the dark living room with my laptop open. The house smelled faintly like dishwasher soap and the lavender candle Emily had begged me to buy. I pulled my credit report, then I pulled it again from another bureau, then I pulled the third. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw it, a hard inquiry from a lender I didn't recognize. Date, 2 weeks ago. My heart started pounding. I clicked deeper. There was an application attempt under my name. Not approved, but attempted. Address correct. Social correct. Phone. Slightly wrong, just 1 digit off. Someone had tried to apply for credit using my identity, Grant, or someone acting for him. It was a familiar kind of violation, not loud, not obvious, the kind that's meant to happen quietly so you don't notice until it's too late. I stared at the screen and whispered, no. Not because I was afraid, because I was furious. Not the hot anger that makes you scream, the cold anger that makes you move. The next morning, I drove to the credit union where our original mortgage had been before Grant refinanced it without my knowledge. I brought my settlement agreement, my deed, my ID, and a binder Diane had told me to keep, organized like a weapon. The loan officer, a woman named Marisol with kind eyes and a practical voice, flipped through the documents. I'm sorry you've had to deal with this, she said. I'm not here for sympathy, I replied, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. I'm here to make sure no one can touch my house. Marisol nodded like she respected that. She pulled up my file, then she paused. Her expression changed. Ms. Bennett, she started, then corrected herself. Ms. Whitmore. I swallowed. It's Bennett again, I said quietly. She smiled faintly. Okay, Ms. Bennett, there's a note here, an attempted change request. My stomach tightened. What kind of change? I asked. A mailing address change, she said. Someone called claiming to be you. They knew your social and your old security question. My hands went cold. When? I asked. About 10 days ago, she said. 10 days. The exact time frame of the credit inquiry. Marisol turned the screen slightly so I could see. It was a log entry. No address change had been completed, because they couldn't verify the caller's voice against a previous recording. I stared at that log entry, like it was a bullet that missed my head by inches. Grant wasn't done. He wasn't just bitter. He was trying to get access again, to reroute mail, to intercept notices, to create confusion. to build another trap. The old Claire would have driven home shaking. The old Claire would have cried in the shower so the kids wouldn't hear, but I didn't. I sat up straighter and said, "What do I need to do so this can never happen again?" Marisol slid a form toward me. "We can add a verbal password," she said. "We can mark the account with an in-person only change requirement, and you need to freeze your credit today." I nodded, already moving. And while she processed the request, something else happened. Marisol looked up and said, "Also, there's a different issue." My breath caught. "What?" I asked. She hesitated. "There's a lien release that was filed," she said, "but it doesn't match our records." My pulse hammered. "A lien release?" I repeated. Marisol nodded slowly, brows pulled together. "It was submitted as if someone paid off an old obligation," she said, "but we never received funds for that. It's not valid on our end." I felt dizzy. A fake lien release? Grant wasn't just trying to hurt me. He was manipulating county records again, creating a paper world that didn't match reality. Why? Because if you can flood a system with confusion, you can slip through cracks, Marisol continued. "It doesn't affect your mortgage directly, but it's unusual, and it means someone's filing things under your property that shouldn't be filed." I stared at the desk between us. My mind went sharp. "Can you print me a full history?" I asked. Marisol nodded. I left with a stack of pages and a new kind of determination. Not just to survive this, but to end it. That afternoon, Diane called me back. I told her everything. The letter, the credit inquiry, the attempted address change, the suspicious lien release filing. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He's escalating." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means he's either desperate," Diane replied, "or he thinks he still has leverage. Either way, this isn't just harassment anymore." My throat tightened. "What do we do?" I asked. Diane's voice turned firm. "We document," she said. "We protect your credit. We notify the court. And if he filed fraudulent documents again, we push. Push." The word sounded like a door opening, because I had been living like the danger was behind me. But the truth was, Grant didn't lose control willingly. He lost it because he was forced, and men who lose control by force often try to take it back by stealth. That night after the kids were asleep, I sat at the dining table again, piles of paper spread out like a crime board. The house was quiet. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window. I spread out the timeline. April, forged deed. June, equity line attempt, settlement, signed in spring. Now, letter and attempted credit application. And then I noticed something I hadn't before, a pattern of dates. Every time Grant made a move, it was right after something good happened to me, like he was reacting to my stability, like he couldn't stand seeing me calm. I thought about the last month. I'd gotten a part-time job, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to re-enter the world on my terms. I'd started doing communications work for a nonprofit. Remote, flexible. I'd set up a small home office. I'd laughed more. Emily had started sleeping better. Noah had stopped asking why Daddy wasn't home. The house had stopped feeling like a battlefield and started feeling like ours. And then Grant sent that letter. He sensed peace and tried to poison it. I stared at the papers and whispered something I hadn't realized I was ready to say. I'm done being careful. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. In person, I took a number. I sat in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights, listening to people argue quietly about property lines and name changes. When my number was called, I approached the counter. The clerk was a middle-aged man with glasses and a patient expression. "Hi," I said, sliding my deed across the counter. "I need a full printout of every filing tied to my address for the last 5 years." He blinked. "That's a lot," he said. "I know," I replied. "I'm willing to wait." He nodded and started typing. As he worked, I watched his face. At first it was neutral. Then his eyebrows lifted. Then his mouth tightened slightly. He looked up at me. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "there have been multiple filings under this address. Some unusual." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Show me," I said. He turned the monitor slightly. I saw a list: liens, releases, notices, a deed correction, a document labeled Affidavit of Ownership. My blood went cold. "Affidavit of Ownership," I repeated. The clerk nodded. "Filed last month," he said. "Not sure by whom, but it's here." I leaned closer. The filing name: Lorraine Whitmore, my ex-mother-in-law. I felt like the air left the room. "What does it say?" I asked. The clerk clicked. The affidavit was a sworn statement that Lorraine had financial interest in the property due to loans provided to the marital household. Loans. Lorraine had never loaned us anything. Lorraine had never paid a bill unless it benefited Grant. This was a new angle, a new way to claim interest, a new trap. The clerk looked at me like he wanted to be kind but didn't know how. "You may want to speak with an attorney," he said. I almost laughed. "I already have one," I said quietly. I left with a thick packet and drove straight to Diane's office. Diane read the affidavit in silence. When she finished, she set it down slowly. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is contemptuous." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Diane said, eyes hard, "they're trying to circumvent the settlement by creating a false creditor claim." My hands shook slightly. "Can they do that?" I whispered. "They can file paper," Diane said. "People can file all kinds of paper. The question is whether it holds, and in whether the court will tolerate it." She looked up at me. "Claire," she said, "I need you to decide something." My stomach tightened. "What?" I asked. Diane said, "We can keep defending, or we can go on offense." Offense. The word felt like a match. "What does offense look like?" I asked. Diane leaned forward. "It looks like a motion for sanctions," she said. "It looks like requesting the court enforce the settlement aggressively. It looks like exposing that affidavit for what it is. And it looks like pursuing a protective order if the behavior meets the threshold." A protective order. My mind flashed to my children, to Emily's quiet fear, to Noah's confusion, to my own exhaustion. I inhaled slowly. "If we go on offense," I asked, "does it get uglier?" Diane's eyes softened slightly. "It might," she said. "But sometimes it has to get uglier to stop someone from continuing." I nodded, because I understood that now. Grant didn't stop because he felt guilty. Grant stopped when the consequences became too expensive. And if he was still trying, then the consequences hadn't been expensive enough. So I said, "Do it." Diane didn't smile. She simply nodded, like she'd been waiting for me to catch up to my own power. Over the next week, Diane filed a motion that read like a slow dismantling. It laid out the settlement terms. It showed the court's prior concerns about fraudulent filings. It documented the new letter, the credit inquiry attempt, the attempted address change, the fraudulent affidavit of ownership by Lorraine. And then Diane added something else, something I didn't even know she'd found. A recorded phone call transcript from a bank. The bank had provided it under subpoena. It was someone calling, pretending to be me. The voice was male, not Grant, different pitch, but the phrasing was familiar. The cadence, the confidence, the way the caller got irritated when asked security questions. Diane highlighted a line in the transcript and slid it toward me. It said, "Look, I'm busy. I don't have time for this. Just change it." That was Grant's tone, that entitlement, that impatience. Even if it wasn't his voice, it was his style, a proxy, a helper, a hired hand. He was using someone else to do what he didn't want traced back to him, and in doing so, he made it worse. Because now it wasn't just one man harassing me. It was a coordinated attempt to destabilize my finances. A pattern. A campaign. The court date was set quickly. When we walked into the courtroom again, it felt different. Not because it was a different room, because I was a different person. Grant was there. Lorraine was there too, sitting rigidly behind him. Grant's attorney looked tired, like he'd had to explain too many things to a client who kept doing the opposite of advice. When the case was called, Diane stood. She spoke calmly, methodically, like she was reading a map. She laid out the timeline. She presented the filings. She presented the transcript. She presented the affidavit. Then she looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "this is an ongoing pattern of bad faith conduct intended to undermine the settlement and intimidate my client. We request sanctions, attorney's fees, and an order prohibiting Mr. Whitmore and any related parties from filing any further documents against this property without court permission." Court permission. A gate, a lock, a way to stop the paper games. Grant's attorney stood and tried to argue it was a misunderstanding. Lorraine's affidavit was an attempt to clarify. The letter was informational. The credit inquiry was not proven. But the judge didn't look amused. The judge looked tired of clever men trying to bend systems. He looked at Grant. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, voice slow, "why is your mother filing affidavits regarding a property that was addressed in your settlement?" Grant's jaw tightened. Lorraine leaned forward as if she wanted to speak, but the judge's eyes stayed on Grant. Grant cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said, "my mother did contribute." "Do you have documentation of a loan?" the judge interrupted. Grant hesitated. Lorraine hissed something under her breath. Grant said, "Not formal." The judge's expression hardened. "So," he said, "a sworn affidavit was filed without documentation after a settlement that already resolved ownership." Grant's attorney tried to step in again. The judge raised a hand. "And," the judge continued, "there's evidence of attempted financial manipulation connected to Ms. Bennett's credit profile." Grant's face flushed. "I didn't do that," he said quickly. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He said, "Mr. Whitmore, you have been before this court with serious allegations of fraudulent conduct regarding property records. The appropriate response would be to stay far away from any behavior that resembles it." Grant swallowed. The judge turned to Lorraine. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "you are not a party to this divorce settlement. You are not to insert yourself by filing documents against this property." Lorraine's mouth tightened into a thin line. The judge looked back at Grant. "Here is what will happen," he said. The courtroom went silent. The judge said, "I am granting the motion. Mr. Whitmore, you and any related parties are prohibited from filing any document, lien, affidavit, notice, or claim against Miss Bennett's property without court approval. Any violation will be treated as contempt of court. Contempt. The word landed like a hammer. The judge continued. Mr. Whitmore will pay attorney's fees for this motion, he said, and the court is ordering an immediate review of the recent filings for potential fraud. Grant's shoulders sagged. Lorraine's face tightened, furious, but contained. Then the judge looked at me. His gaze wasn't warm. It was something better. It was respect. Ms. Bennett, he said, if there are any further attempts at intimidation or fraudulent filings, you notify the court immediately. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor, I said quietly. And in that moment, something shifted. Not because Grant finally learned, but because the system finally placed a hand on his wrist and said, enough. Outside the courthouse, Grant tried one last move. He stepped toward me, voice low. You think you're smart, he said. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't powerful. He was cornered. I don't think I'm smart, I replied calmly. I know you're predictable. His eyes flashed. He opened his mouth to speak, and Diane stepped between us. Do not speak to her, Diane said, voice firm. All communication goes through counsel. Grant stopped. He looked at Diane. Then he looked at me, and I saw it again. That fear. Not fear of me screaming. Fear of me staying calm. Because calm is what you have when you're no longer trapped. Weeks later, the first truly peaceful weekend arrived. No letters, no filings, no threats. Just a Saturday morning with pancakes and cartoons. Emily sat at the table and said, Mom? Yes, I asked, flipping a pancake. She hesitated, then asked, Are you happy? I paused. The question was too big for a child's voice. I set the spatula down and walked over to her. I crouched beside her chair. I'm getting there, I said softly. Emily nodded like she understood. She said, I like it when the house feels quiet. I swallowed. Me too, I whispered. That night after they were asleep, I stood in the hallway and listened. No footsteps, no tense silence, no waiting for a door to slam. Just the low hum of the fridge, the distant sound of rain starting again, the house breathing like it trusted me. I walked into my home office and opened a small box. Inside were the old things I'd saved from my previous life. A business card from my event management job, a photo of me at 26, smiling at a stage setup, a notebook filled with neat lists and plans. I touched the notebook and felt my throat tighten, because that woman wasn't gone. She'd just been buried under just a wife, just a mom, just a housewife, just a word meant to shrink. But here's what I learned. The moment someone calls you just anything, they're telling you the size of the box they want you to fit in. And if you accept that box, you will spend years apologizing for taking up space. Grant wanted me small because small people don't fight. Small people don't ask questions. Small people don't notice patterns. But the truth is, running a home teaches you everything you need to know about systems, about schedules, about details, about reading people's moods, about keeping things moving even when you're tired. It teaches you how to plan, how to document, how to endure. So when I finally had to fight, I didn't fight like someone new. I fought like someone trained. And that's why he lost. Not because I became someone else, because I became myself again. Lesson. If someone uses a label to reduce you, it's because they're afraid of what you'll do if you see your own value clearly. Don't waste your life trying to prove you're more than a role that already requires strength, intelligence, and resilience. Instead, protect your boundaries, document your reality, and build your life so solid that no one can rewrite it without the truth pushing back. Because the most dangerous woman isn't the loud one. It's the one who finally stops explaining herself and starts enforcing what she deserves.